Hey guys, what's up? My name is Vic, and this is part 2 of the Point Blank tutorial series. In part 1, we talked about adding a content pack to the game and getting it to load, and we also talked about the modeling basics. If you haven't seen that video, please check it out before watching this one. This tutorial will be covering how to make a gun. This process works for making an assault rifle or a submachine gun or a light machine gun, snipers, and even pistols. Of course, there are some minor differences between them, and it also would depend on the gun, but this is by and large pretty much the same. Keep in mind this video does not cover how to make shotguns, or double barrel shotguns, or revolvers. Those will get their own separate videos. In this video, I'll be adding the heavy cannon from Doom Eternal. It has a custom model, texture, and set of animations. I've assigned a muzzle flash position and a scope position so that the muzzle flash is properly aligned with the gun in the game, and also so that the scope aiming is properly aligned in the game. And now to review the animations I've created. It has a draw animation, it has an inspect animation, it has a firing animation as well. Now, firing animations aren't always necessary, it depends on the gun you want to make. By default, Point Blank has a procedural recoil animation that you can configure, but for guns that have moving parts like pistols with slides that move back, or sniper rifles where you want to animate the bolt ejection after firing, that is something you will need to manually animate in Blockbench, and that's where the firing animation comes in. As you can see the front part of the gun moving. This is the reload empty animation. This is the animation I want the gun to play in the game when the player has 0 ammo and they're reloading. This is the regular reload animation. This is the animation I want the gun to play when you reload, but your ammo count is higher than 0. So once we have our gun ready to go, we need to export the assets out of Blockbench and into files. Then, after that, we will be putting these files into the content pack itself, and that's how the game is going to be able to load them. So you want to export your model. Make sure to export your model as a GeckoLib model. Your display data. When exporting these files, make sure all of them have the same exact name. So notice how with each of these files I'm generating, they're all titled Heavy Cannon. If you don't get this naming convention correct, things will start to break in the game. Your animations, and your texture. If you're using custom sound effects in your animations or for firing the gun, you also need to have your sound effect files ready to go and inputted into the mod. In Minecraft, sound effects need to be in the OGG format. I'll be adding this gun to my work in progress Doom content pack. So the next couple minutes are going to be us navigating the files and folders inside of the content pack. First, locate your animations folder with an items folder inside and put your animations file in there. Then you want to do the same for the model file. Your model is the GeoJSON that was generated from Blockbench. Put that in the Geo folder. Next, you want to put in your display data. The display data is the name of the file, .json. Next, you want to make some changes to the display data you just put in. In this footage, I'm using a different gun's display data. The template pack also comes with sample display data files, so you can open those up. They're all basically the same thing. Once you've opened up one of the gun display data files from the template pack, look for the bit of script at the top that I've highlighted in this footage, and then copy paste it into your display data file. And then look for a second bit of script at the bottom of the template file, and then copy paste that one too. Notice how here I'm replacing the last bracket of my display data file. Make sure you do this too. I also do this for the top script. This line right here is responsible for the icon texture that your gun in the game will use. make sure to replace it with the name of the icon texture PNG you want to use for the gun. In this case, the texture name is going to be heavycannon.icon.png. For now, these are the assets we're going to be putting in the folders. We'll be adding the sound effects later. For now, we'll get started on making the actual gun. Navigate to the items folder. This is the gun file that I'm going to modify. The template pack also has both ammo examples and multiple examples of various guns. They're all very similar. You can either change a file and its stats, the name, or you can add a new file and therefore a new gun entirely. In my case, I'm going to modify a file that I already have and then name it. Keep in mind that the file I'm currently using in this footage is from an older version of the mod, so there's going to be a couple lines in there that I'm going to delete because they're not included in the template pack, they're not used at all, and you guys don't need them. So I'm going to take this file and name it Heavy Cannon. I'm going to open it, and then first I'm going to change the name of the gun. This is the name that the item is going to have in the game. I'm going to keep the quotation marks. I'm going to ignore type because I'm working on a gun. If I was working on ammo, I would change it to ammo, but we already provided a sample for the ammo item. Here's what it looks like. I'm going to change the ammo capacity of the weapon. I'm going to change the ammo items the gun takes. In this case, it takes two types, the creative ammo from the main mod and a second ammo type I've created for this content pack. I'm going to change it to 50 cal from the main mod. And then I'm going to change the damage, that is the damage the gun does for every shot. And then I'm going to change the RPM. If you don't know what RPM is, it's basically how fast the gun shoots. If you know what the RPM is for the gun you want to add, then just simply type it in here. I'm going to delete this line because it's outdated. The simple pack doesn't come with this. And then I'm going to change the fire modes this gun has. I'm going to remove single and burst, and I'm going to keep automatic. In this line, you put in the name of the gun sound you want the gun to use when firing. So later we're going to add an OGG sound effect, and then we're going to use that. I'm also going to delete this line. I'm going to skip draw cooldown for now, but do not delete it. We'll come back to it. Aiming zoom refers to how far your screen will zoom in when you aim with the gun. The highest is 0.99. The heavy cannon doesn't have a scope, so I'll keep the zoom relatively low. Gun recoil amplitude refers to the procedural recoil animation the gun plays when firing. The higher the value, the more intense the animation is. You can go higher than 1. Shake amplitude refers to how much screen shaking there is when firing. Shake recoil speed refers to how fast the shaking speed is. I usually keep it at 2. View recoil does refer to the actual recoil the player feels when they fire. I'm gonna delete this line. I'm gonna delete this reticle overlay line, but not because we don't need it, but because we'll talk about that in a different video. And then lastly, and finally, we'll get to the juicy part of making a gun, the animations. Here's a rundown of how reload animations work in Point Blank. There's two ways to approach it. If you're creating a gun that's meant to be realistic, chances are you want to add 2 reload animations. One would be the regular reload. This is the reload animation that plays when you still have some ammo in your gun, but you reload it anyway. And the second animation would be the reload empty animation, and this animation plays when the gun has no ammo left and you're reloading. If you're not going for a realistic approach and you want to have just one reload animation, you can simply animate just one animation. Here's a rundown of the template file provided in the template expansion pack. This is the script controlling the reload empty animation, and this is the script controlling the regular reload animation. In the reload empty script, this line here indicates the name of the animation from Blockbench, reload empty. And this line in the other script indicates the name of the other animation from Blockbench, called reload. For the reload empty script, this text I've highlighted here indicates that the animation will play when the gun is at 0 ammo. For this other reload script, This text I've highlighted indicates that this animation will play when the ammo count is higher than 0. If you only want one reload animation, then delete this part of the script, pay very close attention to the brackets I'm deleting and which ones I'm not deleting, delete this comma, then delete this condition line, and then you're done. Now I'm going to walk you through the process you're looking at in this footage of me configuring the heavy cannon animations. First, the inspect animation. I can see in Blockbench that the animation is 3700 milliseconds long, so I'll find the inspect cooldown line in the file and then change the value to 3700. Luckily, it's already that value, so I don't need to change it. Next, the reload empty animation. I'm going to change the duration of the animation. In Blockbench, the animation is 2930 milliseconds, so I'll change it to that value in the file. This text I've highlighted controls the screen movement in a reload animation. In case you don't know what this is referring to, here is some footage of a reload animation with screen movement, and here's some footage of an animation without screen movement. In case this part of the script overwhelms you, or you don't want to deal with it, or you just don't want it for whatever reason, you can delete it with no issues. Pay close attention to how I do it here. And make sure to delete this comma. In my case, I want to add screen movement, but I'll come back to it later. For now, we've finished our work for the reload empty animation, so now it's time to move on to the regular reload animation. It's going to be the exact same process. Go back to Blockbench. The length of the animation is 2570 milliseconds, so I'll put that in. In this footage, I didn't change the draw cooldown, but make sure the cooldown is the same duration as the draw animation in Blockbench. Since I'll come back to the screen movement stuff later, I'll just set the values here to 0. I'll go over this stuff later. For now, I want to add my custom sound effects that I used in the Blockbench animations. Navigate to the sounds folder, and then drag your sound effects there. Then go back and navigate to sounds.json. Basically, we added the sound effect files, but the game doesn't know that they exist. Sounds.json is the registry where we tell the game these sounds exist and we want the game to use them. In this footage, I'm replacing the name of this sound with one of my sound effects. Since I have 4 sound effects I want to add, I need to add 3 more entries in the registry. Make sure the commas are there between the entries, except for the last entry, there should be no comma. You do this for every sound effect you add. So now all 4 entries of my new sounds are done. I can close the file. Also, I made a typo here. Make sure not to make typos or else it's just not going to work in the game. Next, of course, I want to add the texture of the model into the textures folder. In this footage, I neglected to do that earlier. And now we're at a pretty good point. To summarize what I've done so far, I've added the assets, I've added a new gun file with the stats and the RPM and the animations and whatnot, and then I added the sound effects. Now, things are relatively set up. There's a couple things left to do, but the gun should work in the game. As of now, the video has been about 14 minutes because I've been meticulously going through these various settings, but in reality, I didn't actually do a lot of work. I've launched the game to test if the gun works, and it does. But now I have 3 final things to cover. 1, the icon is missing. 2, the name is bugged. And 3, the screen movement. As you saw, the reload animation here has no screen movement because I set the values to 0 earlier. First, to fix the icon issue, put the item icon PNG file into the textures folder, the same place as the other textures. Remember earlier when you changed in the display data the name of the texture file you want the gun to take? That's going to be the file that you're putting in here. After we're done with that, you want to navigate to the lane file in order to fix the name. Now, this specific footage was recorded in the future because I didn't record myself fixing the name and icon before, so you can see the name was already in the lane file. For the sake of the tutorial, I'm going to delete it and then retype it in again. But basically, the idea is similar to the sounds.json file. In this file, you want to create new entries with commas and whatnot in order to register new names. The name you put in at this spot is the same name you put in the gun file. Now that the icon and name are both done, we can finally address the screen movement. I'll do a rundown of it in the sample assault rifle text provided in the template extension pack. What this script does is add screen movement at specific points in the animation. There are multiple entries. In this case, for the reload empty animation, there are 5 entries. Every entry looks the same, but they have different values. Let's walk through an entry. This is the first entry. There are 4 values. The first value, start, indicates when the screen movement of this entry starts. In this case, it's going to start at 0 milliseconds. The second value is duration. This indicates how long the screen movement lasts. In this case, it's going to last 1,500 milliseconds. The third value is initial amplitude. It refers to how intense the screen movement will be. The higher it is, the more intense it'll be in this entry. The screen movement in this case is 0.2. The rate of decay refers to how long it takes for the screen movement to fade. This value kind of confuses me, but I still find it useful, so I use the fuck around and find out method when using this value. To summarize, the screen movement for this entry starts at 0 milliseconds, lasts for 1,500 milliseconds, has 0.2 intensity, and decays at a rate of 0.8. Before we look at the other ones, we'll try using this one and see how it works in the game. For now, I'm going to delete these other ones. So now we have only one, and we'll launch the game. So now we've basically seen what this entry's screen shaking looks like in the game. Let's say we want to change at one point in the animation it occurs. So if the animation lasts 2,130 milliseconds, I can make it start 1,000 milliseconds in. Let's say I want to change the duration. If I make it quicker, it'll probably make it more intense. So now it lasts 400 milliseconds. I'm going to increase the amplitude, and I'll leave the decay. And now let's see what the screen shaking looks like. So as you can see, the screen movement started about 1 second into the animation. So now I want to experiment with the rate of amplitude decay because I didn't like how quickly that wrapped up. So let's set the value to 4. As you can see, now that I've changed the rate of decay, the screen movement's behavior changed. So basically, the purpose of this shake effect tool is to allow players to add screen movement entries and time it with specific points in their animation for the purpose of adding some kind of intensity and dynamic nature to your animations. So for example, if we look at the model I made in Blockbench for the M4, personally I would want to add some screen movement when the hand takes out the magazine here, 270 milliseconds into it, and then I would want to add another screen movement here to indicate that the mag is touching the gun, and then another screen movement to indicate that the mag is inserted into the gun. This one will probably be intense. And then one last screen movement when the hand slaps the button here. So I've restored my entries from before I deleted them. These entries roughly correspond to the specific timings that I just pointed out in Blockbench. I encourage you to change these values a bit and experiment with them in order to understand their behavior better. So with that said, let's take a look at what I did for the heavy cannon. I added 5 entries for the reload empty animation. The first entry starts at 0 and lasts for 1,500 milliseconds. The second one starts at 870 milliseconds, etc, etc, etc. Each of these entries have their own behaviors, and they start different screen movements at different points of the animation. The reload animation also has its own screen entries. One last thing is that in this video, I haven't yet put in the gun sound effect for the heavy cannon. I put this sound effect into the sounds folder along with the other sound effects, and then I went to sounds.json, and then I added a new entry here. Then I typed in the sound here to make sure the gun uses that sound effect. And now everything is done. Let's take a look at what the gun looks like in the game. Now this video is sitting at about 20 minutes. It's honestly longer than I thought it would be and longer than I would like it to be, but in reality I didn't actually do much work in this video at all. You kind of gotta get used to it at first, and then once you do, it's pretty easy to work with. At this point, after getting used to the system, it takes me about 10 to 15 minutes to add a gun. The next few videos will be covering other things like adding shotguns and double barrel shotguns. I'm eventually gonna make a tutorial for revolvers as well. That about wraps that up for this video. Thank you for watching. Editor's note: since these content packs are loaded with the same mod, some conflicts can happen. If multiple packs have items with the same names, the game will break. I encourage you guys to create unique names for your assets and items so that there's no conflict with other packs.